Oh, Canada, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the 10 most popular paint colors in my home and native land of Canada. If you don't know, the Paint People, we're a Canadian company, but a lot of you watching are American, according to our analytics. So I think this will still apply to you, because of these 10 colors, interestingly enough, there's only 2 paint companies that are being represented, one way more than the other. So let's just go through these colors and see if you actually agree that these should be the most popular ones. I'm sure some of you might be ticked off by these, but it is what it is. This list has been put together by hgtv.ca, so a pretty prestigious authority, I would say, in this space. So the first one on the list is White Dove by Benjamin Moore. And this, of course, it's an off-white, which is maybe a pattern you might be noticing as we go further along. However, it's not just any off-white. White Dove, historically for me, in my history of paint, has been one of my favorite kitchen cabinet colors when you're going with a white or a light color in general. And that's because it feels very settled and balanced, warm but not too creamy or yellow, bright but not too stark and lifeless. It does a great job at balancing all those nice off-white qualities that we try to find and look for. But more than that, it's also a great wall color. It can be a good trim color as well, although it's not quite as popular as some of the other colors we're going to talk about in a second. But for those of you that are looking for, let's say, baseboards that aren't super bright and obnoxious, White Dove could be a good choice, especially with those darker wall colors to give you some contrast. Number 2 on this list is Chantilly Lace. Now, of course, this is on the list. Everyone loves Chantilly Lace, except me. It's the brightest white that Benjamin Moore makes. It's extremely stark. Some people say it has the slightest bit of warmth to it. I just more so think it doesn't feel cool, like it doesn't feel blue leaning or gray. Because it's a bright white, it's going to reflect a lot of the light that hits it, more so than any other color by Benjamin Moore. It's a fine color, like there's nothing wrong with going with a really bright white. I just don't feel like it should be your default choice as a white. There are other options out there. There are more preferable options for me that are maybe a touch warmer, a touch softer. But yeah, it's like the brightest of the bright. So of course it's going to get some shine. No pun intended. Or maybe it was intended. I don't know. Number 3 is a favorite of Nick Lewis, one of my buddies, Simply White by Benjamin Moore. Another Benjamin Moore color. Simply White is that little bit of nuance that I think I crave in an off-white. And it's that nuance of warmth. More specifically, yellow-based warmth, rather than, cream or even orange or red or whatever. It's just yellow warmth. And there's enough to it where it just makes it feel a little more friendly, more like an actual home paint color rather than a really just brutalist white color like Chantilly Lace is. The good thing about Simply White is it still gives you that brightness and lightness that a lot of people do crave, just not quite as much brightness as Chantilly, so it will make it feel a little easier to use in larger spaces, even on walls. But still, I think it is quite bright, and you really should avoid using it if you're getting a ton of lighting in that space, because it might just be way too bright, way brighter than you're probably expecting. Number 4, we continue this trend both ways, because not only is it another Benjamin Moore color, it's another off-white. It's Swiss Coffee. So this is another warmer leaning off-white / neutral / light color. But I like Swiss Coffee for a multitude of reasons. So White Dove is kind of my cabinet color choice. Chantilly Lace is my crazy bright white lover's choice. And then you have Swiss Coffee, which is kind of an all over the house color, I find. I enjoy using Swiss Coffee on walls, on trim, on even ceilings, even exterior as a white choice. I think it looks great because the warmth present within it is going to feel a bit softer and more neutralized with the exterior sunlight. And that's why it's always been a consistent go-to exterior white for main body of the home, but even the trim. Like if you're just outlining stuff like windows and all that, I think it's a great choice. Big fan of Swiss Coffee. But I'm an even bigger fan of the 5th color on this list, which is Classic Gray by Benjamin Moore. I swear we're going to talk about another company at the end of the video, but for now, we're just going on this Benjamin Moore bandwagon. And Classic Gray is just a fantastic color that doesn't feel very gray, to be honest. I almost equate it to a very light taupe because it has that warm, slightly browny aspect to it. It is very desaturated and muted and subtle, but it has that nice combination of gray and brown and a lot of white, obviously, to make it very passive, airy, but also kind of contemporary, sleek, and sophisticated. Very versatile. It's a color that I recommend to a lot of people when they're going for a light neutral paint color. And the reason for that is because more often than not, they like it. And if they don't like it, then that just means we can deviate to a darker color or a warmer color or a cooler color or whatever the case may be. But that's kind of a good starting point for a lot of people. The next color has a lot of similarities to classic gray. It's another very popular paint color, obviously. Pale oak. Another OC-whatever color by Benjamin Moore. It is an off-white, technically, but I think it has enough depth to it where I would just call it a light color. You're not going to mistake it for white paint when you see it in person. It has an LRV about 5 points darker than classic gray. So there's more richness to it. It has a little more depth. It feels a little more strong as a color because there's just more color in it. I think it has a little more of a kind of a whitewashed wood aesthetic where classic gray is a little less saturated, a little more of a tint, so it's a little more pale than pale oak, coincidentally. Classic gray does feel a little more gray, while pale oak feels a little warmer in practicality. It has just a touch more saturation. It's more intentional as a paint color, which I think can work even better than classic gray, depending on the circumstance. Especially in brighter spaces where lighter colors just sort of fade into nothingness, that just get washed out. I feel like pale oak will stand a better chance in those circumstances than classic gray, even though I still recommend classic gray more often than pale oak. But they're both great choices, so I'm happy to see them on this list. Next up, wouldn't you know, another Benjamin Moore color. Another neutral, another warm-leaning neutral, although we're finally getting into the darker colors in Revere Pewter. And this is a color that has cemented itself as one of the quintessential legendary colors by Benjamin Moore. They even describe it as being iconic on their website. The thing about it is it's popular for a reason, because it has that nice transitional quality to it where, yes, it is sort of pewter-like, kind of a metallic, earthy, gray coloration, that is also substantiated by some warmth. So there's that beige aspect. Really, it's a mid-tone grayish at the end of the day. So a combination of those two kind of polar opposite ends of the neutral spectrum. The thing about this color, though, is I've heard a lot of people complain about its green undertone. It does have the tendency to show a little bit of green, which normally isn't a bad thing, especially for me, because I love green. When you're picking a color thinking it's going to be safe and neutral and really easy to work with, and then an unexpected undertone comes up, like this one, it can give you some frustrations and some problems in some circumstances. So even though it's extremely popular, it's still not a no-brainer color by any means. So always test your colors. Okay, we got a couple more colors left. And this one is sort of an interesting deviation, but there's a lot of the same here. Gray Owl is number 8 on this list. And I like it for the fact that it's taking a step towards the cool side of gray and neutral, which means it's different than a lot of the other colors we talked about. You don't really have a strong beige undertone present or a brown. There's almost this crisp coolness to it that sort of feels like it leans kind of bluey greeny a little bit. I think a large part of it is the fact that it is very straightforward with its gray aspect, more so than any other color we've talked about so far. Problem is, though, we don't like gray anymore. We don't like it. I hear you all in the comment section, gray is out. So the fact that this is still one of the most popular colors in Canada perhaps is a bit concerning. I don't know. What I will say, though, is if you are looking for a neutral gray and you don't really want it to feel too beigey or warm, or maybe you have a lot of that warm stuff already and you want another alternative that can give you something a little bit different, something a bit cooler without feeling too blue, Gray Owl has always been a great choice. Just the same way that Collingwood has been a great choice if you wanted something a little grougey or like almost purpley within the neutral spectrum. If you like those subtle changes from color to color, that's why these colors exist. It just gives you those little nuanced approaches to very subtle changes from room to room. But at the end of the day, it's still a gray. Last two colors, this next one has been a bit of a surprise for me, because I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, but I do like the color on its own. It's Oxford White by Benjamin Moore. Yes, another white. But what's nice about Oxford White is its simplicity. It has very few visible undertones to it, kind of like Chantilly Lace, which we talked about earlier. But unlike that color, Oxford White is a bit softer. It has some added gray, maybe a touch of warmth as well. But at the end of the day, it just gives you another option to a more stark, plain white that doesn't really pull things into different directions that maybe you're not expecting. It's very straightforward as a white. It just tells it like it is. The one issue that I do have with Oxford White is the fact that because it's so just plain, it doesn't always excite me as a paint color. So it's perfect for a neutral backdrop, art gallery kind of feel, very stark, clean, and then everything else around it in the form of your decor and your accessories and your furniture, those can really stand out because the walls, they're not pulling any sort of focus. But if you like having fun with your paint colors, it's probably not the best choice. Now, number 10, the big reveal. We have a paint color that isn't by Benjamin Moore. And you know what? I'm very, very happy to see this paint color on this list because it is one of my favorite light neutrals. Yes, another off-white by the company Sherwin-Williams. It's probably my highest recommendation when it comes to off-whites from Sherwin-Williams, or even just paint companies in general. It's called Alabaster, the ultimate super versatile paint color that you can use on walls, you can use on trim, interior, exterior. I have found so many use cases for this color. It's a legendary color. It is very, very awesome, but unlike a lot of the other colors on this list, not very exciting. Now, I definitely love talking about Alabaster, which I did in this video right over here if you want to learn more about it.